Hello everyone, Mimikins here. Since the introduction of Zorah Magdaros Gamma armor, I've been inspired to make some blast builds. The Zorah set bonus is critical status, which adds extra blast build-up on critical hits. I've made a set like this before from the previous Zorah set, which I'll include also so PC players can have some fun too. I did have a blast with it. Okay, maybe that was a little cheesy, but it's a fun build. I'm actually quite happy with the new Zorah Gamma set, as all the extra slots has given me much more flexibility on adding extra DPS skills. So not only is the blast proccing more often, but the melee hits do some nice damage as well. There's quite a few dual blades with the blast element. Basil Hawkrook Slayer, these are decent, I like the model type. Strong hatchets, this weapon can only achieve blue level sharpness even with handicraft. It has good blast potential, but would need to be unlocked using the free element duels. 3 augment slots is nice as long as you have the streamstones to use them. Magda Ungulae, these do have some promise in the form of higher raw attack, high blast element and 2 augment slots. But what lets this weapon down is the green sharpness level. Without a mind's eye duel, this weapon will drive you crazy by bouncing off the monster, as well as having a decreased damage modifier. It also comes with minus 20% affinity, which would make it harder to reach 100%. You'll most likely need an affinity booster which only lasts 60 seconds, and some handicraft to bring up the sharpness level to blue. This weapon does work quite well for short fights, but for longer fights, I prefer other weapons. Kulv Tareth also drops a blast weapon called the Tareth Dagger Magma. It's similar to Zorah's, but starts off with blue sharpness. It cannot, however, reach white sharpness even with handicraft. It has lower attack and no decoration slots. Fire and Ice, these are one of my favourite dual blades. It comes with natural affinity and a nice amount of blast damage. The only issue with this weapon is that the blast status is only applied by one of the blades. Having said that, these would be an excellent option for those monsters who also have a weakness to ice. All of Lunastro's weapons have blast, but for me it has to be the Empress Dagger Styx. These are my favourite dual blades. I just love the model and the skill razor sharp for reducing the amount of time spent sharpening. It doesn't have as high blast as some of the weapons, but it comes with white sharpness and affinity. Blast, like all statuses, does have diminishing returns. Each time you proc blast, the threshold gets higher, meaning it takes more hits to trigger a blast. So for my builds, I want a weapon that has good normal damage as well, so the build will be more useful for longer fights as well as the short ones. A high critical rate is doubly important for both DPS and triggering extra blast status, so I wanted to achieve 100% without using the affinity booster, since this only lasts 60 seconds and limits what other tools you can take on a mission. Talking about tools, the Apothecary Mantle is very nice for triggering more blast damage with this build. Let's look at my Empress Dagger Styx build, which has 100% affinity on weak spots. This is very similar to my Stay Sharp Dual Blades build, but this time instead of Master's Touch we have more blast damage. I still like my Stay Sharp build, since I never have to sharpen, but with Razor Sharp, this weapon still maintains white sharpness for a good length of time. So you'll usually only have to sharpen in between rooms, which isn't a bad trade-off for having all this extra blast damage. If you want some extra utility in the build, you can swap out some of the attack duels. Speed Eating, Mushroom Mancer, Divine Protection. Some people also like Stun Resist. A lot of flexibility, which is always good. I love having Marathon Runner on dual blades as it extends the time I can be in demon mode. I also made a blast build for my Fire and Ice dual blades. This also has 100% affinity on weak spots. Since the weapon doesn't have razor sharp, I've added some protective polish and also some handicraft to give me white sharpness. This build is great for monsters that have a weakness to both blast and ice. These are a very solid choice for dual blades. I've always wondered why Capcom called these weapons Fire and Ice when it's actually Blast and Ice. I think it would have also been pretty cool if Capcom added an elemental look to these weapons, like an orangish hue for the blast dagger and a blue or white for the ice, rather than this mishmash look. You can use this with the Magda Ungulae dual blades for more blast damage. It's decent for short fights with affinity booster and apothecary mantle, but for longer fights I find I need to sharpen too often. The other thing is, I always seem to get a visit from Basil as soon as I lay an affinity booster, and he wastes most of it since I have him roaring and laying his bombs everywhere. It is really annoying. This build also may benefit from swapping in a Mind's Eye Jewel since it doesn't have white sharpness, but is usable without. PC players are those with no updates. This build will give you something to play around with till you get some of the arch-tempered monsters added. I would suggest the fire and ice dual blades until Lunastra comes out. This build has 95% affinity on weak spots. The Basil Rook Slayer is also a decent option if you want to use blast against something that is resistant to ice. It does have negative affinity, so could benefit from the affinity booster, especially if you're lacking expert jewels. Zorah's dual blades can be used in this build also, but definitely carry an affinity booster with these and pray Basil doesn't show up. These builds are fun and very satisfying, seeing all those 120 damages coming through from the blast attack. Dual blades are one of the better weapons for applying status since they attack often and fast. I personally find blast weapons particularly good for breaking monster parts, except for tails since that's counted as slicing damage. Dual blades regular damage is considered slicing, so you'll be able to break everything, even without adding skills like part breaker. Of course that would amplify it further. Breaking monster parts makes runs much more efficient as you get more rewards, and some rarer materials can only be obtained from breaking the said part. I hope you guys found the video useful and would like to try out one of my builds. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.